Let me ask you something. When God speaks, do you listen or do you shrug it off? Do you tell yourself, I'll deal with that later? Because let me tell you something. God does not speak just to be ignored. See, life ain't random. That delay, that closed door, that uneasy feeling in your spirit, that's not a coincidence. That's a warning, a divine interruption before destruction. God is trying to get your attention. But are you too distracted to hear him? Let me ask you something. When God speaks, do you listen or do you shrug it off? Do you tell yourself, I'll deal with that later? Because let me tell you something, God does not speak just to be ignored. See, life ain't random. That delay, that closed door, that uneasy feeling in your spirit, that's not a coincidence. That's a warning, a divine interruption before destruction. God is trying to get your attention, but are you too distracted to hear him? You see, God doesn't just whisper for no reason. He doesn't move in your life without purpose. When you feel that discomfort, when something inside you is nudging you, telling you to wake up, to move, to change, to stop, that's God speaking. And too many people ignore it. They brush it off. They pretend they don't hear it because it's not convenient. Because change is uncomfortable. Because stepping into something new requires faith, and faith requires trust. But let me tell you something. Ignoring God's voice won't make his warning disappear. Some of y'all are waiting for a sign, but God already gave you one. You're waiting for him to show up in some dramatic way, but he's been speaking to you all along. Through the situation you're in, through the people around you, through the very feeling in your soul that keeps telling you, this ain't it. But you don't want to listen because listening means responsibility. Listening means you have to do something about it. God doesn't always speak the way we expect him to. You might be looking for a voice from heaven, but God speaks through that missed opportunity, that lost friendship, that door that won't open no matter how many times you knock, that disappointment that keeps you up at night, making you question everything. That's not a mistake. That's a message. That's God telling you, I have something better. Stop forcing what isn't meant for you. But we don't like that, do we? We don't like hearing no. We don't like losing things we thought we needed. So instead of listening, we fight. We push harder. We try to hold on to what God is telling us to let go of. And then we wonder why we feel stuck, why nothing is working, why life feels like we're walking in circles. Let me tell you something. Disobedience has consequences. When God gives you a warning, it's not to punish you, it's to prepare you. He's trying to steer you away from the thing that will break you, that will destroy you. But if you ignore him, if you act like you didn't hear him, sooner or later, you're going to learn the hard way. And I promise you, you don't want to learn the hard way. Some of you right now are in situations you were never meant to be in. You're dealing with pain you were never meant to experience. Not because God abandoned you, not because he didn't warn you, but because when he did, you didn't listen. You ignored that gut feeling. You ignored the red flags. You ignored the signs. You convinced yourself that you knew better, and now you're asking, God, why am I here? But God is saying, I tried to warn you. That's how much he loves you, that he would warn you, that he would send signs, send people, send situations to get your attention. But God is not going to force you to listen. That's your choice. He gave you free will. You can choose to listen, or you can choose to go your own way. But understand this. Your choices have consequences. Think about it. How many times have you looked back at something and said, I knew I shouldn't have done that? That was God's voice. That was him speaking before you made the mistake. But you had to go through it to realize it. And now you know. Now you see. But you don't have to keep learning the hard way. God speaks because he has a plan for you. He doesn't just want to pull you away from danger. He wants to push you toward your destiny. But if you keep ignoring his voice, you're going to miss it. And that's the real tragedy. Not just that you could end up hurt, but that you could miss the blessings, the opportunities, the purpose that He set aside just for you. Some of y'all keep saying, I'm waiting on God, but God is saying, I've been waiting on you to listen, waiting on you to trust, waiting on you to obey. You say you want change, but are you willing to do what it takes? You say you want better, but are you willing to let go of what's holding you back? Because here's the truth. You can't move forward if you keep holding on to the past. You can't step into your calling if you keep ignoring the call. God is speaking, but you have to decide whether you're going to listen. Because His warning isn't just about what He's keeping you from, it's about what He's preparing you for. And if you don't listen, you might just miss everything He's been trying to give you. So what's it going to be? Are you going to keep pretending you don't hear Him? Keep pushing forward with your own plans, knowing deep down that they ain't working? Or are you going to humble yourself, open your ears, open your heart, and say, God, I hear you, I'm ready? Because when you finally listen, when you finally surrender, when you finally trust Him, that's when everything changes. The world is loud. Everywhere you turn, something is fighting for your attention. Social media, news, opinions, distractions. They fill your mind, cloud your judgment, and drown out the voice that truly matters. You wake up, and before you even get a moment of stillness, there's noise. Messages on your phone, notifications, worries, responsibilities. It's a constant cycle, a never-ending stream of things pulling you in different directions. In the midst of all this chaos, God is speaking. But can you hear Him? See, the enemy doesn't need to destroy you if he can just distract you. If he can keep you so busy, so consumed, so lost in the world's noise, then you won't have time to listen to the voice that's trying to guide you. And that's the problem. We've made everything else louder than God. We give our attention to things that don't feed our spirit. We let the world tell us who we are instead of listening to the one who created us. And when God tries to get through, when He tries to warn us, we're too busy, too caught up, too distracted to listen. You ever had a moment where something in your spirit just didn't feel right? A moment where you knew deep down that you were in the wrong place, making the wrong choice, surrounding yourself with the wrong people. That was God. That was His warning. That feeling wasn't random. It wasn't just your mind playing tricks on you. It was Him trying to protect you. But instead of listening, too many of us keep going. We push that feeling aside. We convince ourselves that we know better. And then when things fall apart, we wonder why. Let me tell you something. God will not compete for your attention. He won't fight through your distractions. He won't yell over the noise. He whispers. And if you're too caught up in everything else, you will miss it. You will miss the very warning that was meant to save you. You will miss the direction that was supposed to guide you. You will miss the protection that was set up for you. Some of y'all keep saying, God, why didn't you warn me? But He did, you just weren't paying attention. You were too busy chasing after things that didn't serve you. Too busy trying to fit in with people who were never meant to be in your life. Too busy ignoring the signs because the truth is, you didn't want to hear them. You wanted to do what you wanted to do. You wanted to follow your own plan. And now you're stuck, frustrated, lost. But it's not because God didn't speak. It's because you didn't listen. Think about it. How many times have you looked back and realized that you ignored every red flag? How many times have you told yourself, I should have known better? That's the proof right there. God was speaking. He was warning you, but instead of listening, you let the world's noise drown Him out. The enemy wants to keep you distracted because a distracted person is an ineffective person. A distracted person can't fulfill their calling. A distracted person can't step into their purpose. A distracted person won't hear God's voice when it matters the most. And if you can't hear Him, how will you know which way to go? How will you know when to move? How will you know when to stop? This is why the Bible says, be still and know that I am God. Because in the stillness, in the silence, that's where His voice is clearest. But if you're always rushing, always filling your life with distractions, always consuming things that keep you disconnected from Him, you'll never hear what He's trying to tell you. Some of y'all need to unplug from the world and plug back into God. You need to turn down the volume on everything else so you can finally hear what He's been saying all along. Because God is not silent. He's speaking right now through that feeling in your spirit, through that situation you're going through the very fact that you're hearing this message right now. This is your wake-up call. But here's the thing. You have a choice. God gave you free will. He won't force you to listen. He won't make you obey. You can keep going your own way. You can keep ignoring the signs. You can keep making excuses. But sooner or later, you will face the consequences of a life lived without His guidance. Some of you are one decision away from disaster, one choice away from stepping into something that will break you. And God is trying to stop you before it's too late. But He won't fight for your attention. He won't beg you to listen. That's on you. You have to be the one to slow down, to seek Him, to remove the distractions, and finally tune into His voice. So what are you going to do? Keep letting the world drown Him out? Keep making excuses for why you can't hear Him? Or will you make the decision today to put Him first, to create space in your life for Him to speak, to finally start listening? Because when you do, everything will change. The confusion will lift, the anxiety will fade, the direction will become clear. Because when God speaks, He doesn't just give you a warning, He gives you wisdom. He doesn't just tell you what to avoid, He shows you where to go. But first, you have to listen. Sometimes, God allows struggles to shake you awake. That loss, that delay, that failure, it wasn't punishment, it was preparation. He's warning you, redirecting you. But too often, instead of seeing the warning for what it is, we get frustrated. We ask, why me? Why now? We think God is being unfair. We think He's making life harder for us. But let me tell you something. What feels like rejection is often God's protection. What looks like a setback is really a setup for something greater. Think about it. You ever been in a situation where something you wanted so badly didn't work out? A job you prayed for, a relationship you thought was the one, an opportunity that seemed perfect, only for it to fall apart right in front of you? In that moment, it hurt. It didn't make sense. You felt like God let you down. But then months later, maybe even years later, you look back and realize, thank God that didn't happen. Because if it did, you wouldn't be where you are now. You wouldn't have grown the way you did. You wouldn't have stepped into the better that God had planned all along. That pain wasn't punishment. It was a warning. A warning that what you were holding on to wasn't for you. A warning that if you kept walking down that path, it would lead to destruction. But in the moment, we don't see it that way. We think we know best. We think we have it all figured out. And when God shuts a door, instead of trusting Him, we start banging on it, begging for it to open. Let me tell you something. If God closes a door, don't try to force it open. Because whatever is behind that door is not meant for you. And if you fight against His will, if you keep chasing after something He's trying to remove, you will find yourself in a place of pain that you were never meant to experience. Some of y'all are in situations right now that you should have never been in. And if you're honest with yourself, you knew it wasn't right from the start. You felt it in your spirit. You saw the red flags. You heard the warning signs. But instead of walking away, you stayed. You convinced yourself that you could make it work, that you could handle it. And now you're sitting in the consequences of a decision that God tried to warn you about. But here's the good news. God is still speaking, even in the middle of your mess. Even when you ignored the first warning, even when you went the wrong way, He's still calling you back, because that's the kind of God He is. He doesn't give up on you. He doesn't leave you to figure it out alone. He doesn't say, well, they didn't listen the first time, so I'm done with them. No, He keeps speaking. He keeps redirecting. He keeps making a way, even when you've made mistakes. But you have to be willing to hear Him. You have to be willing to say, God, I messed up, but I'm ready to listen now. You have to be willing to stop fighting against what He's trying to do in your life. Because the truth is, God's way is always better. Even when you don't understand it, even when it hurts, even when it feels like He's taking something away from you, He is never trying to hurt you, He is trying to help you. But if you let your emotions take control, if you let your frustration blind you, you'll miss the lesson. And if you miss the lesson, you'll end up repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Because let me tell you something, God will let you go through the same test until you finally learn from it. If you keep ignoring the warnings, if you keep going back to the same toxic situations, the same bad habits, the same destructive patterns, He's going to keep trying to wake you up. And if you don't listen when He whispers, He will shake your world to get your attention. Some of y'all are in a storm right now, not because God is punishing you, but because He's trying to wake you up. He's trying to show you that the path you're on is not the path He has for you. That relationship that ended, that was a warning. That financial struggle, a warning. That betrayal, a warning. Not to break you, but to redirect you. To remind you that you can't do this on your own, that you need Him. But here's the key. You don't have to wait for life to fall apart before you listen. You don't have to go through unnecessary pain before you surrender. You can choose right now to say, God, I hear you, I trust you. Even when I don't understand, I choose to follow you. Because when you do that, everything changes. Suddenly, the pain makes sense. The delays don't feel like denials. The closed doors don't feel like rejection. You start to see that every struggle was shaping you, preparing you, molding you for something greater. So don't wait until it's too late. Don't keep ignoring the signs. Don't let pride or fear keep you from walking in the path God has for you. Because He's speaking right now, through this moment, through that feeling in your spirit, through the very words you're hearing. The question is, will you listen? Some of the hardest lessons in life come not from what we didn't know, but from what we refuse to acknowledge. God sends warnings. He gives us signs. He places that small voice in our spirit, and yet, too many of us keep pushing forward like we can't hear Him. We convince ourselves that we can handle it, that we know what we're doing, that we don't need to change. But let me tell you something. Ignoring God doesn't make His truth disappear. It doesn't make His plan change. It doesn't make the consequences of disobedience any less real. God warns us because He loves us. He doesn't want to see us fall into something that will destroy us. He doesn't want us to waste years of our lives chasing after things that were never meant for us. He doesn't want to see us broken by choices that could have been avoided if we had only listened. But the problem is, we don't like to listen when we're comfortable. As long as everything feels fine, we think we're in control. We think we don't need to seek Him, don't need to change, don't need to pay attention. And that's why sometimes God allows the storm to come. Not to hurt us, but to wake us up. To remind us that we can't do this on our own. To show us that we need Him more than we realize. Some of you are in a storm right now, and you're angry, you're frustrated, you don't understand why everything is falling apart. But have you stopped to ask yourself, did God warn me about this? Did He try to tell me to walk away? Did He put signs in front of me that I ignored? Because the truth is, God rarely lets destruction come without a warning. That relationship that's breaking your heart, there were signs from the beginning. That job that's draining the life out of you, you knew it wasn't the right place for you, but you took it anyway. That friend who betrayed you, you saw their character long before they hurt you. God didn't just let it happen. He tried to show you. But when we're too stubborn, too attached, too comfortable, we choose to look the other way. And then when it all falls apart, we cry out, God, why did you let this happen? But what we should really be asking is, God, what were you trying to tell me that I refuse to hear? Because He was speaking all along. We just didn't want to listen. The good news is, God is not done with you. Even if you ignored His warning, even if you went the wrong way, Even if you ended up in a place you were never meant to be, God still has a plan. He still has grace. He still has a way to turn things around. But first, you have to acknowledge that His way is better. You have to stop pretending that you have it all figured out and surrender to His voice. Some of you are afraid to let go because you don't know what's on the other side. You're holding on to relationships, habits, and situations that God is telling you to release, but you're scared. You're scared of the unknown, scared of being alone, scared that if you let go, nothing better will come. But let me tell you something. God never takes something away without the intention of replacing it with something greater. That's why He warns you. Not just to pull you away from what will hurt you, but to push you towards something better. But if you keep resisting, if you keep choosing what's familiar over what's right, you will stay stuck. You will keep repeating the same mistakes, keep running into the same problems, keep wondering why nothing is changing. You don't have to live like that. You don't have to keep learning the hard way. God is speaking right now, telling you to listen, telling you to trust Him, telling you that He has something greater. But He will not force you. That choice is yours. Some of you have been ignoring the same warning for years. You keep going back to the same toxic people. You keep making the same bad financial decisions. You keep running from your calling. And every time things go wrong, you act surprised. But God has been telling you all along, that's not for you. He's been trying to shift you, to grow you, to take you somewhere new, but you keep resisting. And as long as you resist, as long as you ignore Him, as long as you let fear and comfort control your decisions, you will stay exactly where you are. But God didn't create you to stay stuck. He didn't put you on this earth to live in cycles of confusion, frustration, and regret. He has a purpose for you, and His warnings are meant to protect that purpose. But you have to be willing to listen. You might be asking, how do I hear God? It starts with stillness. It starts with shutting out the noise, with removing the distractions, with getting into His presence. It starts with being honest with yourself about what you already know, because deep down, you already feel the areas where God is speaking. You already know what needs to change. You already know what He's calling you to do, but will you listen? That's the real question. Not whether God is speaking, but whether you're ready to obey, whether you're ready to stop making excuses, whether you're ready to trust Him even when it doesn't make sense. Because when you finally listen, when you finally surrender, when you finally say, God, I hear you and I trust you, everything will shift. The things that once held you back will start to break off. The cycles that kept repeating will come to an end. The weight that you've been carrying will be lifted. But it all starts with one decision, the decision to listen. There comes a moment in life when you can't ignore the signs anymore. A moment when everything in you knows that God has been speaking, that He's been warning you, that He's been calling you to change. You can feel it in your spirit. You can sense it in your circumstances. The doors that used to be open are closing. The things that used to excite you don't fulfill you anymore. The people you used to rely on are drifting away. Nothing feels the same, and you can't shake the feeling that something bigger is happening. That's God. That's His hand, shifting things, moving things, trying to get your attention. Because sometimes when you won't listen to His whispers, He will let life shake you, not to destroy you, but to wake you up. To remind you that you can't keep doing things your way and expect to walk in His blessing. You can't keep ignoring His voice and expect His favor to follow you. You can't keep walking in the wrong direction and expect Him to bless a path He never called you to. Some of you are frustrated right now because things aren't working the way they used to. The shortcuts you used to take aren't working anymore. The excuses you used to make don't feel right anymore. You're feeling stuck, confused, disconnected. You're looking at your life and wondering, what's wrong? Why do I feel like this? Let me tell you, you're out of alignment. God is calling you higher, but you're still trying to live at the same level. He's calling you to let go, but you're still holding on to things He told you to release. Let go. Go, go, go. Let go of things you didn't understand. Let go of things you told you to release. He's calling you into purpose, but you're still playing small, still chasing after things that don't matter, still trying to control your own path instead of surrendering to His. And because you won't listen to His voice, He's letting life remind you. The discomfort you're feeling, that's not punishment. That's a sign that you're not where you're supposed to be. The things that used to bring you joy but now feel empty, that's God showing you that you were never supposed to settle there. The struggle, the frustration, the tension, that's His way of telling you it's time to move. But too many people ignore the warning signs until it's too late, until they've wasted years in the wrong places, until they've lost themselves chasing after things that never mattered, until they've hit rock bottom and have nowhere left to turn. But you don't have to let it get to that point. You don't have to wait for a disaster before you wake up. You can make the choice today to listen. Because here's the truth. When God warns you, it's because He sees what's ahead. You might not see it yet, but He does. He sees the trap that's been set for you. He sees the pain that's waiting down the road if you don't change course. He sees the destruction that's coming if you keep ignoring Him. But He's giving you a way out right now, through the conviction in your spirit, through the people He sent to speak truth into your life, through the very fact that you're hearing these words right now. That's not a coincidence. That's a warning. That's God giving you one more chance to wake up, to shift, to finally take Him seriously. But what are you going to do with it? Are you going to brush it off and keep living the way you've been living? Or are you going to recognize that this is your moment? See, we always think we have more time. We think we can ignore God now and fix it later. We think we can keep playing games and then get serious when it's convenient. But what if later never comes? What if the decision you make today determines the rest of your life? What if this moment, right here, is the moment that God is giving you to turn things around? Because let me tell you something, every delay has consequences. Every time you ignore the warning, you set yourself up for something that could have been avoided. Every time you put off obedience, you push back the blessings that God has for you. Every time you refuse to let go of what's holding you back, you delay stepping into the life God actually created you for. Some of you are asking God to change your life, but you're not willing to change your ways. You're praying for breakthrough, but ignoring the things He's been telling you to release. You're asking for direction, but refusing to move when He tells you to go. It doesn't work like that. You can't have God's blessing while rejecting His guidance. You can't expect His favor while ignoring His voice. So this is your moment, right now, to stop running, to stop making excuses, to stop pretending like you don't know what God has been telling you to do, because deep down, you do know. You've always known. You've just been too scared, too comfortable, too stubborn to act on it. But enough is enough. It's time to listen. It's time to surrender. It's time to trust that God's way is better. It's time to stop holding on to things He's telling you to release. It's time to stop ignoring the signs. Because if you don't listen now, if you don't take this seriously, you might find yourself in a place you were never supposed to be. You might end up carrying burdens you were never meant to carry. You might miss out on what God has for you, not because He didn't want to bless you, but because you refuse to obey. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can choose differently, right now. You can decide to listen, to obey, to trust that God's warning is not rejection, it's protection. The only question is, will you listen?